wonderful day. Time once again to welcome you to yet another edition of the program, Viewpoint. I have another distinguished Nigerian on the program today. But before I introduce you, my name is Bumi Babanumi, welcoming you on board the program, Viewpoint for today. Our guest today is an elder statesman, is a social commentator and a university don. Is a professor of professors, a professor of animal science at the University of Ibadan. Was a former executive chairman of Oyo State Universal Basic Education Board, Oyo Sube. Is an industrious indigenous of Ibadan land and an honorary chief in Ibadan. He holds chieftaincy title of Ajiroba of Ibadan land and chieftaincy title of Ashipa Olomi of Omiadio. So, my dear viewer, join me to welcome to the program Professor David Olusoji and Dejumo. Prof, you are welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you very much, Bumi.
Yes, sir.
Baban.
It's a pleasure having you on the program.
Thank you so much.
It's been quite a while.
Yes, I always
What
enjoy.
has been happening?
Well, Nigeria has been happening to me. That's been happening to everybody.
Positively, I presume.
Well, petrol has been, fuel price has been happening to me. Inflation has been happening to me. So that's I said that Nigeria has been happening to me. I don't know about you.
Honestly, we have all been beaten down by all this. But we thank God we are still standing.
Okay.
All right, sir. So now, before we go to the issues of the day, we are going to talk about you. We are going to talk about Oyo Sube. We are going to talk about you being a university don, and of course, as a chief in Ibadan. So let's really talk about where you are coming from.
Okay.
Who were your parents? Where did you grow up? Which schools did you go? And why the choice of the profession, agriculture? So,
well, let me start by saying I'm a child of divine orders because my father belonged to the Holy Orders. He was an Anglican priest.
okay.
So I was born into priesthood. My grandfather was also a priest. So as I said, I'm a child of divine order. So all my life till I graduated, I was always I was living in the vicarage, the house of priests. And I was born in Sokoto, and my father was just transiting from government service to church service. And then he went to Emmanuel College, and he was posted to Mina to start his priesthood. So I started my primary education in Mina. And I remember Mina was a huge district in the Anglican Communion. It extended to the farthest end of Niger State, Abuja, all those places were Cuba. There were tiny, tiny hamlets. I remember we would go on evangelism. All those people in Abuja, they were practically naked indigents in those days. Yes, they were practically naked. They only had a loincloth around the men around their waist. The women were bare-chested. I remember that very, very vividly. And they would load all their farm wares, yam and donkeys, and all of that. And it was nice. We enjoyed the rituals, their marriage ritual, where they will flog the intended husband in the marketplace, things like that. So that was openly, yes. Wow. No wife for him if you cannot withstand that pain. They will have loaded him with all manners of concussions. Yes, so we will sit down as kids and be watching, And it was nice because in Mina then we were the elite, the Yorubas and the Igbos, because Mina was a railway town, and there was a railway station there, and of course the station master, Mr. Adenuga, was Mr. Shweton was an Egba man, and most of the other workers, The housewives were not really working. They were laborers, you know, but the elite then. But there was no religious discrimination because there was nothing they would do in the Emir's palace seminar that my father would not be invited. And there was nothing we would do in that the Emir would not come. So, so my growing up was actually very interesting. I loved it. And as children of priests, we had a kind of pampered not in the house, in society. These are the children of the priest. Take a sweet, take a biscuit. And I remember evenings, people would gather around my mother. They would bring the rice from the farm, local rice. And they will come with all manners of, you know, bowls, these calabash bowls, and they will start sifting the rice, the way people process for gold, until they remove all the chaff and the sand, because rice was only once a week. And from there, I moved on to, I went to about 6, 7 primary schools. But but my father was always transferred. After a year, they would take him to another station. Of course, we would go with him. Maybe not, but I remember, so I schooled in Mina, I schooled in Kaduna, I schooled in Lupon, I schooled in Jebudesha, I schooled in Igongon, in Lesha, I schooled in Akure, I schooled in Ofa. All these are primary schools. Yes, all the primary schools. There was times we spent 6 months and my father was transferred. You know, so that's the only painful aspect is that I don't have any childhood primary school friend. The only person I know was somebody that was my mate in 1965 in Ijebu-Jesha, who were primary 5. But I ended up in Ibadan. It was even he who recognized me. I said, so Asoji, we went to primary school together, and I said, then there is another professor, Falai. He's retired now from University of Ibadan. He too was a primary school classmate in Mina. So those are the only 2 living that I know. You know, the others, you know, so primary education didn't allow me to develop childhood friends. But from there, I went to Ibadan Grammar School. And that was where stability came in. My father was transferred to Ibadan, back home, because we are from Ibadan. And like I said, we are from a priestly lineage. We actually, because I'm from Agbeni in Ibadan, but our ancestry is actually from Okeofa Baba Sale. Okeofa Baba Sale is known as Baba Sale, it's Baba Sale Igbagbo. Because my great-great-grandfather, Kukomi, was the one who welcomed Christianity to Ibadan land. He was the one who housed David Hindra in 1852 when he came to bring Christianity to Ibadan. So he housed him in our ancestral home in Okeofa. So we are actually children of Okeofa Baba Sale. And from Okeofa, my great-grandfather relocated to Agbeni, and where we, you know, grew up, and then our village in Ido, that's where I have a chieftaincy title, you know, and thank God we were able to, when our chairmanship, we were able to establish a primary school and secondary school there. So, Grammar School was the turning point. That's where I was able to have stability. And that's where my career, my flair for education was pronounced. Because I started primary from 1, my grammar school. I was diligent. But at the end of the year, I got a Western State Government scholarship. Scholarships were given in those days, you know, by government to about 20 schools in Western State. And they like the top 2, 3 per school. So 50 pupils in Western State got that scholarship to run from 1 to from 5. I was among the few. I read it in the newspaper. That was the first time I knew it would come up in the newspaper. 3 times. So I
That's wonderful.
So I think so I got that scholarship at the Christian. So it helped my father. The school fees of £8.13 my scholarship covered it. £8.13 per term. The scholarship was £50.
Okay. So
yes, per year. So my father even got change from the scholarship. Then O levels, most of my papers were in distinction. My results. So I proceeded to HSC, and again money, but the ZAT company, they gave me a scholarship for HSC. I don't know how that came about. The principal just called me and said, "You've been given a ZAT scholarship for HSC." I said, "Okay," and I was happy. So I did my HSC. Then I went to University of Ibadan. Then I found my name again on the board of Oyo State Government Scholarship, awardees. Those ones I didn't apply for. And I never applied for any scholarship. But when I finished my bachelor's, I wanted to go and work, but Dr. Lawyer was already in government, and he said, no, I should go and do masters. And I said, where will I get the money from? I want to work and make some money, help my parents. And he said, no, apply for federal government scholarship. So I now applied for federal government for masters, and I got that. So I used that in 1980. So at 1980, I got my master's degree. And thereafter, University of Ibadan made me a university scholar. And as the university scholar, the university took over my doctorate program. So the university was responsible for my research, my tuition. All the 3 years of PhD, I was university. 3 years of PhD. So I was on the scholarship of the university as a university scholar. And so I was able to get the PhD before I was 27 years old. I was just 26. I was just 26 plus, and I got the PhD. So I said, well, I've been on government. I've been a burden on government all this while on their scholarship. So let me give back.
I believe you must have worked for it. They must have seen your brilliance, your intelligence.
Well, I would just say the talent God gave me, because interestingly, my life I was a socialite. Even though I was getting very high grades, I was a socialite, but when it came to my books, I would not joke with it. And but when it came to recreation, I also, look, that's a piano in my house now. When I want to, relax, music is there for me, And so maybe because I was into meaningful activities, like I said, music, reading, stuff like that, not going around doing, naturally, when you have a PhD, the most natural follow-up is to go into the academia, and that's how I became a lecturer. But coming from Ibadan, how many of us are actually, let me put it, at that time, 1983, when I got a PhD, how many Ibadan, sons had hit that kind of, high level? So it was easy for me to find myself. I would say maybe I was the first. I got a PhD in reproductive physiology, so I have been the first Ibadan man to be a reproductive physiologist. Maybe I'm even the first Ibadan to be a professor of reproductive physiology, and I'm not so sure. So I gravitated, naturally to other aspects of social community, public, so that's how I was able to get into government, and politics, and all of that. And here we are now.
In a sense, you're a man of so many parts, beautiful parts.
Yeah, just the grace of God, so yeah. Now at 70.
At 70?
Oh yes, I'll be 70 this year. So, all right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I exercise well. I play golf 3-4 times a week, and that is which keeps my blood running.
Yeah. And keeps you healthy too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank God for life. So, having gone through that, maybe before we leave your childhood, are there any remarkable incidents you want to share with us before we leave that aspect? Maybe interesting things that happen that you really want to share that can be of benefit to our viewers?
Well, it shows that children should be inquisitive, and children should be positively adventurous. Let me put it that way. And also set goals and targets. Because in Ibadan Grammar School, by the time I was in Form 3, I think I'd read every novel in the school library. And I'm talking about maybe 2,000 books. I read everything. I gave myself that challenge, and I said, I want to read every book in this library. So I would borrow 8 books, you know, and I think the limit was about 8 books. I will go and borrow 8 books, and 2 days later I will return on the 8 and carry another 8, you know. And I was doing that, you know, and still, you know, reading. I was enjoying it, you know, reading my books. And okay, I'll say this. My friends were, you know, as you know, students now in secondary school. We were in Barangama school. Ejide was our neighbor. So that the kind of, I said, adventures, you know, and those are kind of adventures. And at the Barangama school too, you know, Barangama school was a place where you grew up very, very quickly. And we had seniors that, you know, I'm happy to have them as my seniors, because the people like Makadunuga and Kennaman, you know, people had made names in this country. I'm happy that we were in school together. They were my seniors, you know. For some 3-4 years, my senior. But, you know, the pranks that we played made it easy for us to still continue, even at this stage. Are you getting it? Yes, and it helps. Because a friend told me that, oh, when they went to do an interview in Glo, they said, you are from background school? Say, yes. You don't have a problem. The only problem you may have is if you cannot remember all those fabus that you used to share, all those escapes. Say, because before you are employed, Mike Adenuga will have to personally interview you. And if you cannot demonstrate and display all those rascality, you say you can't work here, you didn't even learn anything in grammar school, you know. So those are the, you know, adventures that we are happy, you know, that
Looking at those adventures, trying to compare it with what young ones are experiencing now. It's like things, you all know that things are quite different. What you went through when you were in the secondary schools and even the university, you can't compare with what is really happening now with our young ones. I want us to look at this situation whereby even as students, you'll be able to marry your books with your social life. You can't expect young ones not to have social life, but then there must be a line of demarcation. How do we now marry these two? Just like you did. And you studied hard, and you said you were able to recreate. At the end of the day, you came out even with fine colors. Look at you now. So for the young ones, how should they marry this? So there is no way you can stop them from having social life. And at the end of the day, you want them to study properly. So how do we marry these two?
So the problem, the major problem now is that societal values have changed. What we will be scared of doing are things that these young ones just, you know, get into very casually. When we were growing up, there was something like autism. We could get drunk as an adventure. And once you saw that this thing does not work, you abandoned it. We all tried everything. In fact, my very first adventure was dancing at hedges, you know, smoking. But I realized that, look, this thing is not, after 2-3 months of smoking, I gave it up over 60 years ago. I've never told you since. So, but the young ones just don't have any barriers. And unfortunately, the economic situation has made it so terrible that they now see that any means of, everything was not about money nowadays. In our day, it was about living comfortably. But now, everything is, people are, you know, all those Yahoo things that we find today, you know, my heart bleeds. Because when I was a postgraduate student, I bought a Range Rover, which I can't even afford now. But as a student, I bought a Range Rover. And it was so easy. We had land here in Ibadan. All the directors had their own official cars and go, which were imported 2 doors. Eventually, Lena started assembling 4-door Range Rover. So they decided that they will, you know, dispose of those, you know, and eventually I was able to, through the directors who are my like big bonds. How much did I pay? 3,000, I think 3,050 naira for a Range Rover. But it was still big money there, but The question is, how do I even raise that money? Myself and my little brother, we were showing films all over campus. You will go and hire film in Apapa, Ampeka, 19 naira per day. You will hire the film for 3 days, you pay you 17 naira. But we'll find a way to delay and run it in Badon, you run it in Ife, we'll run it in the School of Nursing, School of Ajelele. We will tell Ampeka that, oh, there was no light yesterday, oh, there was no GSM. So we'll be doing landline. Ampeka saw they couldn't even show film for 2 days. They took light. We couldn't get generator. We are showing it, oh. So at the end of the day, for the 270 naira we paid, 30 kobo was the ticket we were given. So it even took 3, 4 for us to make 1 naira 20 kobo for tickets. But by the time we ran it all over the place and we are returning the film, we will have made a profit of about 300 naira. A lot of money. We won't spend it. We will again go. We will take, to go to Ampeka Papa as a student, I want to take the aircraft. The aerodrome had, there was an airport at Samanda. The flight from Ibadan to Lagos was 750, and it was 15 minutes or so. So it's easy for me to get there at 7 o'clock, enter that F-27 aircraft, and by 12 noon I'm back in Ibadan, in my classroom in UI. By 7 p.m. we are showing the film. You know, so I could get 3,000 naira over 6-7 months to buy myself a car, and we will still go to Ife. You know, we had our fun. But the children of today, if you are not careful, there will be you see part 2 student riding a Lexus of 40 million. You won't even know where the money came from.
Well, you know, time is not always a friend on the program. We have to put a pause to the program for today. We'll bring you the concluding parts of the program. And don't forget, Professor Adejumo is still going to be our guest. So don't go away. Join us same time next week for the concluding part of the program.